And welcome everyone to this edition of Quarantine Q&A presented by Alabama One Credit Union. Alabama One has been voted Tuscaloosa's best credit union and best mortgage lender. Alabama One offers low-rate auto, mortgage, and business loans, plus protection for it all with Alabama One Insurance. You can visit any of their 9 local branches or check them out online at alabama1.org. Alabama One, a proud supporter of Crimson Tide Athletics. Hello again, everybody. This is Roger Hoover. Welcome back to the Crimson Tide Sports Network, and we're starting to turn our focus to the upcoming football season, and we certainly hope that everything can go on as planned for Crimson Tide and SEC football. And today we're talking with ESPN and SEC Network football analyst Cole Cubelic, who, of course, is an alum of Auburn. That's why he's got the Auburn shirt on. And Cole, it's certainly great to see you. How's everything going today?
I do my radio show from home, so I just get up and put gym clothes on every day. Didn't even think about the fact that I was going to be on the Crimson Tide Sports Network's Facebook page, but hey, it is what it is.
Well, right now, Alabama fans really like you because you on your Twitter account have been releasing some of your top fives for different things around the country, and you had the top 5 offensive lines in the country, and number 1, Alabama. Why was that?
I think we'll start first with talent. And I think you have multiple NFL players on this Alabama offensive line. I think you have possibly multiple first-round picks. If not, I think you got a couple first- and second-round picks. I think Alex Leatherwood is probably offensive tackle number 2 nationally behind Penei Sewell at Oregon. Some people might have Walker Little from Stanford there, but I'd put my money on Alex there at number 2. I think Deontay Brown is a top 5 guard. Probably don't have him ahead of Trey Smith at Tennessee or Wyatt Davis at Ohio State, but he's going to be in the mix for your next guy after that. Landon Dickerson, I don't suspect he'll stay at center this year. My reason for that is Darian Court and how much I like him. But he's a guy that's probably going to get drafted. He's going to make an NFL roster. He's got versatility. He can do different things. And then you got a super talented, just like Marvel comic book hero guy and Evan Neal that's just a massive human being that is going to get better and going to improve. Technique, fundamental, footwork is all going to come a long way with him. And he has a long way to go to be an elite player, but he's already shown that the talent is there. And he's played a lot of football for a true freshman going into his second year. So I think when you just look at the talent that's there, the guys that are going to be playing in the NFL, Emilio Okior is a guy that's played a lot of football. We've seen him play some meaningful snaps. He'll be a part of that group this year, and they've obviously recruited well. So when you start weighing them against, Tennessee, Ohio State, Kentucky, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, I just think that the level of talent is a little bit higher across the board with the Alabama offensive line. And then you throw into the mix, like I said, where guys are ranked. I mean, a top 2, top 3 tackle, a top 5 guard. And then I think also the amount of football that they've all played. You got guys with a lot of experience. I mean, Dickerson played at Florida State and then came in and played every game for Alabama last year. Leatherwood's played some guard, played some tackle. He's played for a couple years. Evan Neal's young, but now has a full year of experience under his belt. So I just think as big and physical as that group's going to be able to be, along with the talent and experience that they have, that gave them an edge over every other group that I looked at.
Yeah, when you look at Alex Leatherwood, what stands out to you the most on tape, and then how do you expect him to perform this year as Alabama's left tackle?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you notice with Alex when he's at tackle is he just has a perfect frame. I mean, he has a perfect tackle frame. I had an offensive line coach that used to say, when God made guards, he made you, or when God made tackles, he made you. And that's kind of what I think about when I see Alex Leatherwood, just those long arms that seem to go, past his kneecaps. And, he's got that slender torso and, just he's got the long frame that bends well, that just, he looks like an offensive tackle. And he uses his hands extremely well. He's got good change of direction. He's got good feet. He's a technician. And a lot of guys with his talent don't necessarily focus that much on that portion of their game. They just sort of rely on their talent and their ability. They try to get away with that. But you can tell, and I've talked to guys that have been around him. I've watched him coming out of high school, and he was kind of that guy coming out of high school. And I felt like he was a little bit out of position at guard. I don't feel like he's built to be a great guard, but he was successful there and did fine. But I think he's better suited to be a tackle because of his length, because of his feet, because of his ability to change direction and his body control. All those things show up. And it's weird to me how many people don't show confidence in how he played last year, or don't want to talk about him as being a guy that had a great season last year. And I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't know if maybe Jedrick was taking a lot of the hype last year, or there were just other guys that people were focused on. But sometimes having a quiet year as an offensive lineman can be a really good thing, because most of your average fans, the only time they focus on an offensive lineman is when they have a bad snap, or they give up a sack, or they have a penalty, or they jump off side. I mean, those are the times that people say, oh, look at that guy, he's terrible. I can remember getting beat up in my mentions when I would talk about how good Cam Robinson was, and all people wanted to focus on was him jumping off sides. I'm thinking, that's like 5 or 6 plays out of 800 plays. Like, what are you talking about? So I think the fact that Alex had a quiet year, some people focus on that and think that it's bad, but it actually is good. And when I go back and watch him, I thought he had an excellent year last year. And I think his ceiling is still high. He's not a guy who I think is sort of tapped out on his ability or what kind of player he can be.
And also, as well, his profile continues to rise with Alabama fans in writing that passionate letter that turned out to be the video for the Alabama football team when talking about Black Lives Matter. You got to like that leadership from someone like him on the offensive line.
Yeah, and I think that when you go back to the technician part of who he is, it just shows you how much football means to him, that how much being a part of the Alabama football team means to him. And he has a bit of a serious nature about him, but I think a lot of that is just focus, and some of that focus now is turning into leadership because he is becoming one of the older offensive linemen, one of the older players on the team. And I don't say that in a negative way at all, but for him to be able to use his platform and have people hear his voice and share things that are important to him, I think it's great. I love seeing college football players understand the power of the platform that they have. That's always been my stance when it comes to what players get and player benefits and paying players, is the power of that platform. There is no dollar amount that you can put next to that. And I think Alex sort of figuring that out, where, hey, I can share some things that might help change society, that might change the way people view me and my teammates and other college football players and other professional athletes. And that wherewithal shows you his maturity. So I'm happy for him. I'm proud of him. And, it's things like that make you root for guys. I've been rooting for him for a long time, but things like that really make you want to see a guy be successful.
You did a nice job a minute ago kind of going position by position on Alabama's offensive line and telling us what we could see. And one of the possibilities was that you could see Landon Nickerson move over to guard, and that would open the door for Darian Court at center. For Alabama fans who haven't seen Darian Court as much, what can you tell us about him?
I could tell you, man, the first time I saw Darian was at the Under Armour All-American game down in Orlando, and I was working the practices for ESPN, and Evan Neal and Wanye Morris and a couple of other guys were getting all the hype going down there. And I kept walking away from practice every day thinking, who is this Court kid? Like, he looked like the most ready to play guy down there, technically, fundamentally. Now, he didn't have the size and the frame that Evan Neal had, but he just looked like he had a great understanding of the position. And here's the thing, center's really hard. Even if you did it in high school, it's obviously snapping the ball is something that has to be secondhand and has to happen on every play. But when you start having to identify point linebackers and you start having to call out protections and change things and signifying the blocking scheme to your position, to your teammates, that it starts happening fast. And some of the looks you get in this league, it's not easy. So even if a guy looked like that, it's hard to step in and play at that position because there's so much going on. But I think he's a guy that understands angles. He understands leverage. He bends extremely well. He looked a little bit light last year. If he could add some strength and size and bulk, I think that would help him. But just the understanding of pad level, leverage, feet, hands, he already has a great grasp on all of that. So he's going to be way ahead and much more advanced than a lot of other players when you start talking about those little things that help make you a great collegiate offensive lineman. So I first saw him there, and we got to see a little bit of him in a reserve role late last year, and I thought he did some nice things. I thought at times, he looked like he was thinking a little bit too much. That comes with reps. But he's a guy that I think very well could be Alabama's number one center and the center for the entire season this year. And that obviously opens up different possibilities of, who's going to go to right tackle. I think there's a lot of people that just assume that that's going to be Evan. I do have a few doubts about that, but I think Darian Court, if given the opportunity, could be a very good center for not just the Alabama team down the road, but this year's Alabama football team.
Everyone is certainly concerned about the COVID-19 pandemic and the impact it had on spring practice. How does it really impact an offensive line that's trying to gel and kind of play together for the first time as we get ready for whatever is coming up during summer camp, getting ready for the fall?
The first thing that comes to my mind are some of the things we just talked about. So let's think about cross-training. And is Evan Neal going to be your right tackle? How much has he repped right tackle? We don't really know, and I would assume not a ton, because you got a freshman that's starting at guard. Even at the end of the year, you're not taking him out and giving him first-team reps at right tackle. And you didn't need to last year because you had Jedrick, and Womack was backing him up. You had bodies last year that could handle that. So spring ball was going to be the time that you did that. If you're going to move Landon and maybe try him at right tackle, has he been able to get reps out there? Playing center and being a backup guard, probably not. I don't think that he probably has done a ton of that. So I think it really does impact this Alabama offensive line from the standpoint of, if you were going to move some guys around and try some guys in different places, now when you start doing that when practice does begin, you take away from some of those reps where your starting five are going to be together. And that's when they gel. That's where that chemistry comes from. That's where the unity comes from. That's where the understanding of who leaves a double team a little bit early, who needs you to get inside a double team a little bit more quickly, what guys maybe struggle with certain protections and plays, and whether they struggle with a quicker pass rusher and you need to help them a little bit more, or some guy is more susceptible to get beat inside, so you have to be able to help them with that. All those things come with reps and time and being together and being around each other. So I think it works against you. And I always say the only way to get good or be great at offense, defensive line is doing it full speed in pads against somebody who's trying to make you look bad. Receivers and DBs can go run 7-on-7 stuff, and quarterbacks can go throw, and running backs can take handoffs, and they can go run routes, and even linebackers can run around a little bit in coverage with tight ends and whatnot. But O-line, D-line, we can go work our pass sets and we can work our hands, but that's not real. It's not going to be that way. And there's not a lot of run blocking stuff that you can really do. I mean, yes, you can work on your technique and fundamentals, but at the end of the day, you got to be in pads trying to push people around and trying to keep people from pushing you around and get past you. And so I do think not having spring ball is going to work against offensive and defensive lines. I think returning starters is that much more important this year, because sometimes I'd point fingers and laugh at, okay, that guy, he's a returning starter, but that doesn't mean he's all SEC or an All-American. It's just maybe he was the only guy they had there, or there was an injury there before and he had to play. This year, I think that's a little bit more important. I think having guys that understand the speed of the game, the physicality of the game, that means it's going to mean a little bit more this year. And then I think, too, in fall camp, I wouldn't accuse Nick Saban of this, but I think a lot of coaches are probably going to be very timid with how they handle fall practice. You think about not going through spring, and then on top of the fact that these guys didn't have access to legitimate weight rooms for months, they're not going to be as big and strong as they were before. They're not going to, and that's not even talking about the conditioning part of it. That's just talking about bulk, mass, strength, power. They're not going to be built the same way. So I believe, personally, a lot of coaches are probably going to look at those two things and say, we can't go out here and kick the crap out of these guys for 2 or 3 weeks before the season starts, because we're going to lose them. And we're going to have 4 or 5 guys get injured for the season, and then we're done. I think coaches would probably go easier in practice and say, let's at least get in games and know we've got them to start the season. If we lose them, we lose them. But I'm not going to take chances on losing guys in fall practice. It's kind of become the mentality with a lot of schools just because it's so limited anyway. But I think now, not having some of the acclimation period in spring ball to hit, and then not being in your weight rooms with your strength staff for 2.5, 3 months is going to cause a lot of coaches to sort of step back. I don't even think they'll do it on purpose. I just think they're going to go into this thinking we can't get a lot of guys hurt. And if we go out there and try to hit like we normally do, we're not going to have anybody to go out there and play with, especially with the fact that if somebody tests positive, they're going to be out for a while. And then the guys they're around might be out for a while. So I think a lot of coaches are going to be very cautious with how they handle camp. And that goes even further to working against what offensive linemen are dealing with heading into this season. I think we're on the brink of probably the least physical football season that any of us have ever seen in our lifetimes.
I wanted to go to a question from our Facebook page before we let you out of here. Griffin Smith asked, have you seen a lot of changes in the nuances of playing on the offensive line on a position-to-position basis since you were playing in the late 90s?
Yeah, some of it has. I mean, you get some of these spread offenses and you're not even really trying to move guys. It's position blocking. Matt Stinchcomb and I have had some really funny conversations of just how much better we would be in playing in some of these systems today. And then you bring in the RPO aspect of things where you might have a dominant run block, but it doesn't show up because you got a guy throwing a slant right over the top of your head. Or they're throwing the check to the running back out in the flat because there's not a safety or linebacker out there covering him. I think those things obviously help as well. The basic fundamentals of pass sets, pass blocking, footwork, hand placement, working combination blocks and run blocking, that hasn't changed a whole lot. What you do when you pull, how you open your hips. There are new techniques with pulling where guys are staying square to the line of scrimmage, and that's a little bit different. But I think the only thing that has really changed is how much guys are asked to finish. And I think that works against great offensive line play more than anything else. And that is a direct result of tempo and pace, because you think about at its core, when teams are going fast, what is your general focus? After the play is complete, or even before the play is complete, it's to get lined up wherever the football is spotted again as fast as humanly possible. Whereas when I played, you tried to drive your opponent into the ground or into the stands until the whistle blew, and then 5 seconds after that. We didn't really, unless it was 2 minutes, and that was only at the end of the half into the game if you're trailing, then we didn't do that. And we didn't even do that as fast as some guys are running their regular offenses these days. So I think finishing blocks and then some of the position blocks in some of the spread offenses and how they operate there with a lot of the reads and a lot of the manipulation of just trying to create space, that stuff's a little bit different. But technically, fundamentally, it's really not a whole lot different than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Last question, we'll get you out on this. Not only are you an SEC Network and ESPN analyst for college football broadcast, but you keep your pulse on college football all throughout the year with three-man front on Jocks in Birmingham. And just as we sit here on June 30th, how are you feeling about the prospects of the upcoming college football season? And just as we kind of go through the next few weeks, what's most important for you to make sure we do have college football?
I think this coming up weekend is huge for college football. Personally, I see where we are in our footprint, specifically Alabama, Florida, Texas, South Carolina, Tennessee, parts of Georgia, and the trends are not great. They're not what we want them to be. They don't seem to be going down at the rate that we would like to see. Some are going up. And I think when you look at, I think there's lessons to be learned by a lot of these players having arrived back to campus and having been living with their parents for 2 months and in the middle of a pandemic, not able to really live their lives, so to speak. And hopefully the first 2-3 weeks of this, they've learned that you don't need to be going out. You don't need to be spending the night at your girlfriend's house. You don't need to be going to house parties. You don't need to be hanging around a bunch of people. You don't need to be sharing food. Try to handle things in an appropriate manner. And if they're not doing that, and then on top of that, we get some sort of wild, crazy 4th of July weekend with a lot of these college football players, I think a week from now, a week and a half from now, we might have a pretty good gauge on what college football is going to look like, because it could really go south after this weekend. Or I think if it can normalize after the 4th of July weekend, then I'll have even more confidence that we're going to be okay. I think we're going to see football. I think we're going to play football. I think there's a chance that it starts on time. And that may even mean a couple of the week 1 games are canceled, or a couple of the week 1 and 2 games are canceled from a non-conference perspective, because either geographically or financially or from a risk perspective, they just don't make sense. Like we saw Dayton and Southeast Missouri canceled their week 1 game, their first game of the season. Well, you know what Southeastern Missouri does week 2? They go to Oxford, Mississippi to play Ole Miss, and they're going to get a check for $600,000 or $700,000. My thought on that is they're protecting an investment. They need that money to make their athletic department go, and they're not going to risk it against Dayton, a game that they're probably not making any money, and they're going to wait and go play at Oxford. And even if that's the only game they play this year, they probably just took care of their athletic department budget off that one game. So it's going to be different. Prepare yourself for different, whether that means fans in the stands, the way it looks on television, what the schedule is, how the schedule's handled. It's just going to be different. I don't know how different. I think we're going to get football. I feel confident that we're going to play, but I would probably say right now, prepare yourselves for something that doesn't look the way it's looked the last 5 to 10 years.
Well, we certainly hope we do get to see Tom Hart, Jordan Rogers, and yourself on the sidelines at Bryant-Denny Stadium coming up this season for Crimson Tide football. But just today, we really thank you for your time, especially breaking down Alabama's offensive line, which you have rated as the best in the country heading into this upcoming college football season. Just Cole, thanks again, and we appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, that was Cole Cubelic. Thanks for watching this edition of Quarantine Q&A here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network.